Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I've got our 1996 Chevy K1500 in the shop. My wife and I are going to be taking this thing on an extended road trip in the coming weeks, so I'm going to be installing all new brakes and doing some fun stuff in the process. Should be a good time. If you guys haven't seen any of the previous videos that I've made on this truck, I've got some links down in the description below. This thing was originally destined to be hauled off to a junkyard, and I bought it from a local shop for a grand total of $500. It was an awesome buy. I ended up putting a new motor in it, and I've done a whole bunch of other stuff to it. It's actually turned out to be a really amazing truck to have around the house for, relatively speaking, not a whole lot of money. But it's starting to show its age in certain spots like the brakes and whatnot. I've been meaning to do them a long time ago, but there's just not enough hours in the day, not enough days in the week, not enough days in the month, and so on and so forth. So I just went down to my local O'Reilly Auto Parts and picked up every single thing I needed. I've got their brake vest, rotors, pads, calipers, drums, shoes, lines, hardware, you name it, I picked it up. So we should be good to go for everything we need to swap out on the truck. Later in the video, I'll be installing a aftermarket radio, a double din head unit, which is going to be a pretty cool install, and I'll be taking care of some other long overdue things that I just wanted to do on the truck. So it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge video, but we're going to have some fun. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. This truck had sat outside quite a while before I bought it, so I'm actually surprised the brakes did as well as they did for as long as they did. But the rotors are pretty rusty, they're starting to get grooved, the pads are rusty and wearing down. Thankfully there's no leaks or anything like that. You know, they're okay, but for driving long distances, I think it's a good, safe thing to just go ahead and replace it all, just for peace of mind. Thankfully, you can actually get rebuilt calipers at O'Reilly. I mean, we could go through the effort of redoing this one and whatnot, but for the sake of time, it is very convenient just to basically chuck it all and replace it and be done. It's important to remember, especially if you are not going to be replacing the brake line, you don't want to let the caliper just dangle by the brake line. You could damage it, rip it, cause issues later. Thankfully, this upper control arm provides a nice little resting spot to set this one in the meantime, but you can use, you know, a rope or bungee cord or something like that just to kind of keep the tension off. Before I start putting all the new parts on here, I want to get all of this area as clean as possible. So we don't have any contaminants, we don't have any rust or anything like that, and everything is properly greased up. So specifically with the hub surface right here where the rotor slides onto, you want to take a Scotch-Brite pad and just knock all of this stuff off. You can also put some anti-seize on that surface. Rust and whatnot is definitely more of an issue in the northern states, but we still deal with it a little bit here in North Carolina. So they actually make some in a can, which I don't have, but after you clean all of this stuff off, you can rub some anti-seize on there or just spray it and be done with it. We've also got these contact surfaces right here where the caliper sits. We want to make sure that's good and clean and actually grease those 2 points up. I'm also going to take a wire brush, clean the dust shield, and try to get all of the excess brake dust and grease out of the way so we have as clean of an area as possible. Now that's a big difference right there. There's almost nothing more satisfying to a car enthusiast than putting on new parts. last thing important to remember about replacing discs, a lot of time there'll be some kind of oil film type stuff on it. It's like a rust preventative type deal. You want to make sure to take your brake cleaner and get all of that stuff off of the rotor before putting everything on. For comparison's sake, this is the original passenger side caliper and this is the BrakeBest remanufactured driver side caliper. They're pretty much the same calipers, but this one has already been thoroughly cleaned and redone with all new hardware and seals. It's all pre-greased, so it's literally a remove and reinstall type situation. And for the money it costs just to get one of these calipers, I didn't see the effort of trying to tear this one down and redoing it, because if we were just doing pads and rotors and the caliper was in better shape, we would compress the piston. You know, see how that one's kind of popped out a bit and this one is in where it needs to be to put in new pads. We'd have to push the piston in with like a C-clamp or something like that. We would need to pop out the slide pins, clean those, re-lube them, replace all the rubber seals, which all the rubbers and stuff come with a new set of pads. And then on the back side of the pads, like we would have to, you know, grease the contact surfaces here and inside the piston. But we're just gonna get this done and out of the way. Chuck that, install that. And then when you're all done, you can pull the old pads out of your caliper, take the line off, and then return it to O'Reilly for a core refund. With the new caliper in place, the bolts are torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. Now I need to finish removing the old caliper. Basically at this point, it's just a matter of undoing the rubber line where it connects to the hard line. Much better. Now let's tackle the rear brakes. For the sake of time and lack of repetitiveness, I went ahead and replaced the brakes on the other side of the truck. So this is the last brake I have to tackle. And just like the opposite side, I don't see any fluid leaks or anything that looks super abnormal in here. So we're good to go with just getting everything replaced. We've got new brake shoes, wheel cylinder, all hardware, everything. Changing out all of the drum brake stuff isn't quite as straightforward as the front disc brakes, but it's still fairly easy as long as you follow the right processes. And if it's something that you haven't done a whole lot of, taking detailed notes and if you can, taking pictures can really help. How these work, if you don't know a whole lot about drum brakes, is that you've got the fluid coming into the wheel cylinder here. The wheel cylinder pushes out this way, puts pressure on the brake shoes. The shoes push up against the inside of the drum, and that friction is how you get stopping. Kind of like how the pads in front squeeze against the disc, you've got these squeezing up against the inside of the drum. There's a network of springs and levers and stuff that control the tension. You've got the mechanical parking brake lever here, so when that's applied, it does a similar thing as far as pushing out the brake shoes. So we've got to start taking out things here and there, but we're basically going to just gut it all out and rebuild it. to put all the new stuff together. We've got our new drums, the shoes, the adjusting hardware, and the various springs and pins. Of course, this area needs to be super clean as well before putting on all of the new parts. I've got it as clean as I could get it. We don't have any grease, there's no excess brake dust, no trash. It is ready for lubrication. And I'm not sure if you guys saw this earlier, but I'm actually using this Permatex brake parts lubricant. It can withstand temperatures up to 3,000 degrees, and it's perfect for what we're doing. I mean, brake parts lubricant. You can pick this up at O'Reilly. We're basically lubricating all of the metal on metal touch points, like portions of the backing plate where the shoes ride, where they contact this little stop plate down below there, where the parking brake lever makes contact with the shoe, and of course the ends of the wheel cylinder. Different vehicles are different as far as the lubrication steps and whatnot, and if you're watching this video thinking about tackling your own brakes and it's not on one of these trucks, definitely double check the procedures on that. So let's go ahead and get to it and wrap this up. Alright, everything is assembled and greased up. Now the shoes just need to be adjusted, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. It's a little easier to explain with the old parts, just being that I have more room to show you guys here. Here are the old shoes. We've got the lower retaining spring, we've got the upper retaining spring right there, and we have the adjuster assembly. So you've got this piece right here. It's two rods, they fit together. There's a threaded, like toothed nut type thing and a little washer. So this piece right here rides on the toothed ring, and as you make adjustments, just by rotating it with a flat blade screwdriver or a small pry bar, it'll click, and as it's clicking, it expands the shoes closer to the inside surface of the drum. You don't want the shoes too loose and you don't want them too tight. These are self-adjusting drum brakes, but you still want to get them pretty close. That being said, these threads need to be lubricated with the copper anti-seize, just like we've been using already. Other than that, it's a relatively straightforward process. Like I said, it's just a matter of remembering what springs go where and the order at which you put them back together. One of the more random things I wanted to go ahead and knock out was replacing the starter. There's nothing wrong with the starter in the truck except that it's technically not correct for this model year. By this time, GM had moved to a more compact starter design. It was almost like a factory gear reduction style starter. The one that's currently in the truck is the older, larger small block Chevy starter. You know, it works just fine, but it's more of a personal preference thing. The older style starter is a little bit less pleasant on the ears than the newer style, and I just like having everything as correct as possible. So I went down to O'Reilly and picked up a new Ultima starter, got it all swapped out, so instead of it starting up like this, it now starts up like this. Like I said, it's a noticeable difference. I know I'm picky about things, but anyway, now let's go ahead and do the radio. I love originality as much as the next auto enthusiast, but this original radio definitely leaves a lot to be desired. So I actually picked up a kit that will allow me to convert the stock 1.5 DIN hole to a double DIN hole, and we can put in a newer head unit that has Apple CarPlay and, you know, hands-free telephone and all that good stuff. This is an older head unit, but it'll definitely serve us well in this truck. I pulled it out of one of my other projects because I'll be changing up the audio system setup as I work on finishing the car, so we won't let it go to waste. Now let's go ahead and start pulling everything out. Oh yeah, this is pretty sweet. I've already got the USB cord hooked up, so Apple CarPlay is working. This radio is Apple CarPlay only. I've also got the microphone hooked up for the telephone system, and I didn't bother putting a backup camera in this truck, even though the radio is capable to support it, but I disabled it so it doesn't even show up at the bottom. It's just nice and clean, and what you see is what you get. But being that we have Apple CarPlay, you know, obviously all the phone apps transfer over, including various navigation apps, so definitely convenient. And if I didn't have all this stuff sitting here, you guys could see it a little bit better, but the USB cord is long enough to either stow the phone in that cubby right there, or just set it on the console. So I've got the new dash bezel prepped and ready to reinstall into the truck, but I did something a little bit different. I painted the cup holder lid as well as the vents black to match the bezel versus trying to paint the bezel like the partial gray to match the rest of the interior. Because if you guys remember, from this line out all the way around, it was color matched to the interior. The rest of the inside portions were all black. But this is a textured finish, and I couldn't find the exact gray to match the interior because the vents were, you know, faded just from years of sun exposure and stuff. So I was going to have to paint it all anyway for it to look right. And because of the texture, I was worried that some of the paint might escape, you know, out from underneath the tape and mess up the rest of the bezel. So long story short, I thought it was easier just to paint the vents and the cup holder to match the rest of the bezel. So all of this will be black, and it'll match the steering wheel and the steering column and stuff. So I think it'll look okay. Let's go ahead and get it reinstalled in the truck. Well everyone, that pretty much wraps it up. I think this turned out really, really nice. We've got all these extra convenience features, and with this bezel, it looks like it could have been factory. At this point, it's time to give the truck a good, thorough cleaning. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to leave a like down below because it really helps the videos a lot. And if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so because, of course, there's always a lot more content where that came from. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.